Ken Trahan along with Lenny Vangilder. It's our First NBC Bank weekend preview brought to you by First NBC Bank with 35 locations throughout the greater New Orleans area and beyond. That's First NBC Bank, proud sponsor of SportsNOLA.com. It was a very good season for the LSU Tigers that came to a disappointing ending, beaten by TCU, and the Horned Frogs left no doubt who the better team was. They whipped LSU twice. Lenny, I think this told LSU where they needed to be, and I talked about it last night, but losing Latz to injury, losing Mac Marshall late, clearly when you get to Omaha, you have to have depth in pitching. That means 6 to 8 guys you can really depend on. That means 4 or 5 power arms, and LSU just lacked a little bit in that area.
Yeah, and I think it wasn't as much the number. It was, the use of them, so to speak. You had 2 solid starters that you could run out there at any point. But, this team's Achilles heel throughout the year was the ability to develop that Sunday starter and develop some consistency out of that number 3 starter position, and it reared its ugly head in the final game. They were able to get through the regional and get through the super regional without having to deal with that. You were able to mix and match in the first game against Lehigh and then have your 2 studs set up to go in the second and third game. The super regional only got to 2 games. It did not get to game 3. Now when you're in the situation, you had to use it here Thursday night. You're running Zach Pearson out there as a starting pitcher, which, don't get me wrong, a lefty against that lineup would seem like a good matchup and was probably the right way to go. But you knew you weren't going to get very much out of him. They knocked him around. There was a lot of quick hooks, a lot of surprising hooks in my mind, especially at the start of innings where maybe you'd run a guy back out there for another inning. But all in all, look, TCU was the better team, and they deserve to be on in the Final Four. What's going to be interesting in my mind is you're sitting there with Vanderbilt and Virginia as the 2 unbeatens. Is somebody going to jump up and beat them twice, or we're going to see a rematch of the championship series when we're sitting here on Monday?
It's interesting for LSU because guys like Stallings and Godfrey, they have power arms, and they were really good early in the season, but they simply went south and they weren't able to recover it. They lost confidence. Clearly there's ability there. And they got pretty much every other pitcher back that matters, and they hope to have Latz back next year too. So they should be very good on the mound moving forward, but they're going to have to replace basically everyone except for Jay Godfrey in their lineup.
That's going to be interesting to see what they do offensively next year and how that lines up. Now look, you're bringing in good players all the time to that program, so it will not be a surprise. And some of these guys played bit roles this year. A guy like Papierski behind the plate, and some other guys who played smaller roles out there who will get the chance to move into a full-time situation. So the Jordan twins, for instance. But it's what happens when now all of a sudden instead of getting 30 or 40 at bats, now you're getting 200 at bats. How are you going to deal with the course of a long grind of a college baseball season? And, facing the type of competition that LSU does. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, Jake Fraley, of course, coming back next year. Now, with regard to the Saints minicamp is over, and we won't see them again until the Greenbrier at training camp. And by all accounts, they were very pleased with what they saw, but who isn't at this time of the year? The big takeouts from this, Kevin Williams, can he give them anything? Does he have anything left in the tank? Because that could be a big addition to plug the run and allow linebackers to roam free, which they weren't able to do last year. And of course, a healthy Jarris Byrd, a healthy Brandon Cooks, a few other guys that were hurt last year back as well. But these are keys moving forward for the New Orleans Saints.
No doubt. It's time to get your rest and get ready to get after. Like you mentioned, we're about 6 weeks away from the start of training camp. Things will die down a little bit, and then it all cranks up for real. And the fans here will get a chance to see training camp the last week of August in between the 2 home preseason games. That'll be the one opportunity they have to see training camp here in New Orleans. Of course, the other 3-4 weeks I would be taking place at the Greenbrier.
The themes sticking with the Saints and LSU. Tom Benson ruled to be competent, and the motion denied against Renee and Rita and Ryan. And unfortunately, this is just the beginning. There's probably going to be an appeal, which probably won't be upheld. But then there's still the trust case in Texas. And I know people think that maybe they can breathe a sigh of relief, that they can move on from this. But no, unfortunately, this is going to continue on.
Yeah, I think at this point, is he competent? Yes. Are we surprised at that? No. The big thing I think that remains is this. If you're going to take something out of a trust and try to replace something of equal value, it's going to be now the question of what determines what the value is. And that's going to, that's part of what we're dealing with in Texas, and I'm sure that will be an ongoing battle as well, and probably, see some sort of a appeal, whatever's allowed. But, I've seen, and, people use the word Tom Benson wins. I could not disagree more. No one won in this. The fact that this thing got to a courtroom and got dragged out, thankfully not in the public eye, that it was done behind closed doors, but still, no one won in this situation.
Agreed. And then, of course, the bad news from LSU, more players arrested off the field. And what really troubles you is that one is the leader of the team, the starting quarterback. And obviously you have to let it all play out to find out the specifics. But it was a bad day for LSU. They had a defensive tackle that was arrested prior to that. So really bad day. And I know the question arises, I was asked this on radio this morning, do you blame the coach, the people they're recruiting, or is it simply individuals? And at some point there's accountability. There's probably a little bit of both involved in this, but you have to be extremely disappointed if you're LSU. And you don't want to single out one guy, but your starting quarterback, the leader of your team.
Yeah, it's troubling. And ideally these things will sort themselves out one way or the other. Either, we're sitting here talking about suspensions of these guys at this point. Whatever is going to happen, ideally it will sort itself out, because the thing right now, we're in June. Camp doesn't begin till early August, and you don't want this to carry over as a distraction into the early part of the season. And as we look at things from the football field, now obviously there are, potential crimes that have been committed here and people being charged with such. And, there is that aspect of it as well. But obviously we focus more on the, on the sports end of it. And like you mentioned, the leadership aspect, that is concerning, that the supposed leader of your football team, your starting quarterback, would be involved in this, as well as the fact that, these are, for the representatives of your program that have, allegedly committed crimes here. And that's not the type of thing that you need going on trying to head into the season.
Prior to that, the defensive tackle, Barroom, Saints quarterback, former Tulane quarterback, wine bar. There's a familiar refrain here.
It is, and it's, unfortunately, it's society as we know it. And these guys, if some of these things are going to happen, like for instance, the Ryan Griffin incident, we didn't find out about it for 11 days. You'd like to think that some of these things just happen and, they're not going to show up under the radar, because things like this do happen out there all the time. You have to be smart enough not to put yourself in a bad situation. And I'm sure that's the message that Les Miles and every other college football coach out there tries to preach to his players is, just don't put yourself. You see a bad situation, get away from it, And unfortunately, too, is you've got people out there, and in this day of social media, and everybody's got video on their cameras and such, you never know when you're going to see something that's going to just pop up somewhere. So you've got to be really smart. You can't live your life within a bubble, but you have to be smart about how you live it.
Incidentally, we got into this business to talk about the games, to write about the games. We don't like talking about this, but it's news, and we do have to speak about it and report it. Finally, Alvin Gentry to be introduced next Monday as the head coach of the New Orleans Pelicans officially. We already know this. And the NBA draft coming up next week, so these will be exciting times for the Pelicans.
Yeah, you've got just a second-round pick, but still it's somebody who, as we just saw in the NBA Finals, Draymond Green was a second-round pick. You never know when you can find that diamond in the rough in the second round. It'll be interesting to see. Will be a little bit of the spotlight on the two LSU players that came out early. I think one of them has a chance to go in the first round. The other one maybe a chance to go in the second round. We'll see how that all plays out for those guys. But we could talk more about the NBA draft next week.
We certainly will. That's our First NBC Bank weekend preview, brought to you by First NBC Bank, with 35 locations throughout the greater New Orleans area and the Florida Panhandle, and growing. That's First NBC Bank, proud sponsor of SportsNOLA.com. He's Lenny. I'm Kenny. Have a great weekend, and God bless you.